Hello, my name is Amanda Pikkaraine, and I am currently a graduate student at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse, where I am working towards my master's degree in physical education teaching with an emphasis in adapted physical education. This website is a part of my graduate project for completing this program. The focus of my graduate project and this website is connecting the meaningful physical education and universal design for learning frameworks to adapted physical education. I chose this topic because I have a special interest in meaningful physical education framework and working with students with disabilities, and I wanted to explore how this framework could be connected to an adapted physical education program. I first learned about meaningful physical education, also known as meaningful PE or MPE, during my undergraduate experience at Winona State University from my professor, Dr. Malley. When learning about this framework, I had noticed that there wasn't any literature on it being used in an adapted physical education setting. Therefore, that is why I chose this as a starting point for my graduate project. Throughout my research for this project, I found that the meaningful physical education framework and adapted physical education connect quite easily. However, for the purpose of this project, describing this connection proved to be more difficult than I had initially imagined. This is due to the highly contextual factors of teaching adapted physical education, such as the differing disabilities of the students and the varying student placements. However, I found one aspect that all adapted physical educators have in common, which is that they must write IEP goals for their students and work towards those goals. Therefore, I chose to apply the meaningful physical education framework to how adapted physical educators write IEP goals and pair that with the universal design for learning framework when working towards those goals. Within this website, I have designed an approach to how adapted physical educators can use the meaningful physical education and universal design for learning frameworks when creating and working towards IEP goals with their students. Additionally, there are explanations of each of the concepts that are involved in this approach, as well as examples of it being used in practice. On the homepage of this website, the concepts that are involved in this approach are briefly defined. Adapted physical education is a service for students with disabilities who have needs related to physical education. Meaningful physical education is a framework that can help guide teachers' pedagogical decision-making in order to prioritize meaningful experiences for students in PE. And universal design for learning is a framework that can help guide teachers planning for instruction decisions to be more inclusive of students of all abilities. Then the connection between each of the concepts is described. These connections are the basis for this project. To put it simply, the connection between all these concepts is that they can be used together to create physical education setting that is inclusive, accessible, and meaningful to all students, including those with disabilities, and to promote participation in physical activity within the community. Connecting adapted physical education, IEP goals, and the universal design for learning framework are very easy connections to make. When a student qualifies for adapted physical education, then they must have IEP goals. And in order to work towards those goals, adapted physical educators, whether they realize it or not, are implementing pieces of the universal design for learning framework to make the activities accessible to students they are servicing. Additionally, connecting the meaningful physical education framework with the universal design for learning framework was also fairly simple because these frameworks value similar concepts. Both frameworks value giving student choice and autonomy, creating tasks that are meaningful and authentic, teaching students self-awareness about what motivates them, relating content to students' lives, and using democratic practices. The more difficult connections were connecting meaningful physical education to adapted physical education and IEP goals, because this is something that hasn't been explored yet. However, I'm proposing that an adapted physical educator can use the meaningful physical education framework to guide how they create their students' IEP goals in order to make them more meaningful. Through following the meaningful physical education framework, the adapted physical education teacher can incorporate student autonomy into the creation and implementation of the IEP goals. If adapted physical educators utilize the meaningful physical education framework when creating IEP goals, then their goals may be more likely to guide students towards enjoying and valuing movement and participating in physical activities within their community. Additionally, to tie in the universal design for learning framework to this connection, adapted physical educators can incorporate both meaningful physical education and universal design for learning to structure their time and environment with their student to make it more meaningful and accessible. The shared values of democratic practices and personally relevant, authentic learning between meaningful physical education and universal design for learning should guide adapted physical educators on their teaching practices with their students. Additionally, the individual features within a meaningful physical education and tenets within the universal design for learning of both frameworks should be intentionally planned and supported as well. Incorporating these frameworks into how adapted physical educators create and write students' IEP goals and into how they service their students may lead to their students enjoying physical activity and seeking more opportunities to be physically active. Finally, on the homepage of this website is a section describing the rationale for this project or why it matters. It is fairly common knowledge that individuals with disabilities are not as physically active as their typically developing peers, as well as that they have less access to activity opportunities. Those are the reasons why creating this approach matters. Individuals with disabilities should be able to experience the pure joy that can be caused from movement, just like their peers. And through creating meaningful IEP goals that lead them towards being physically active in their community, this can happen. Allowing students and/or their parents to have a voice when creating IEP goals can lead to students developing skills and activities they have access to in their community. Involving students and/or their parents in the decision-making process of how they will make progress towards the goal and how they will know the goal is achieved can give them ownership of their goals. Incorporating the practices of and features of the Meaningful Physical Education Framework can give students meaningful experiences when working towards their goals, assist them in understanding why they enjoy activities, and guide them towards trying new activities. Incorporating the practices of the Universal Design for Learning framework can make physical education accessible to students and teach them how to advocate for changes they need to activities in order to participate successfully within their community. Combining all of these actions together can create a powerful adapted physical education program that values student autonomy, self-advocacy, and providing meaningful movement experiences that can lead students towards seeking physical activity opportunities within their community. This matters because individuals with disabilities should have equal opportunities to experience the joy of movement in a way that is accessible to them. From here, individuals use this website can navigate to different aspects that are involved in this project. For the purpose of this video, I will briefly go through each of the pages on this website. First, we'll explore the concepts page. Here you will find easy access to links for each of the pages of the concepts involved in this project. Those interested in learning more about adapted physical education and IEP goals can navigate to this page. Here, individuals can learn about the general structure of adapted physical education, which briefly describes how a student qualifies for adapted physical education services, placement decisions, and servicing students. Additionally, individuals can learn about all aspects of adapted physical education and IDEA, or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. This section describes all relevant information in IDEA regarding adapted physical education. Following that, individuals can learn about IEP goals in adapted physical education. Individuals can read relevant legislation of IEP goals under IDEA, as well as learn about SMART goals. Finally, at the bottom of this page, individuals will find additional resources to learn more about adapted physical education and IEP goals. Within these resources is a PowerPoint presentation from Brad Weiner, who is a well-respected adapted physical educator, as well as a parent packet from the Center on Disability Health and Adapted Physical Activity at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. They use this to offer to parents of students with disabilities as a resource for adapted physical education. And then state-specific resources are available as well. From here, individuals can navigate to the Meaningful Physical Education page, which provides detailed information about the various aspects of this framework. This page provides an overview on what meaningful physical education is, as well as provides a description of what meaningful experiences are. This is important to understand because meaningful experiences are such an integral part of this framework, and they're essential to understand in order to use this framework successfully. Following that, there are sections for the teaching practices involved in this framework, as well as the features of this framework. Within the teaching practices and features, there are examples, an overview, and an explicit connection to adapted physical education. Meaningful Physical Education is a newer framework, so I assume that a lot of this information will be new to individuals using the site, which is why I tried to provide as detailed descriptions as possible. Finally, at the bottom of this page, there are additional resources to learn more about meaningful physical education. Within these resources are a PowerPoint presentation, one created by me and a peer, and another created by the Learning About Meaningful Physical Education research team. Additionally, there are links to the website that have a plethora of information related to meaningful physical education, as well as a link to the Meaningful Physical Education book. All of these resources are great for those interested in really diving into this framework. From here, individuals can navigate to the Universal Design for Learning page, which is set up very similarly to the Meaningful Physical Education page. On this page, individuals can read an overview of what Universal Design for Learning is, as well as more in-depth information about each of the tenets of this framework. Within each tenet, there are examples, an overview, and a description of how it connects to adapted physical education. Finally, at the bottom of this page, individuals will find additional resources to learn about Universal Design for Learning. Within these resources are an interactive infographic, which was created by the National Consortium for Physical Education for Individuals with Disabilities and the National Center on Health, Physical Activity, and Disability, as well as Jopert articles, and a link to the Universal Design for Learning and Physical Education book. From here, individuals can navigate to the main page of the approach, which I have created to utilize these frameworks in adapted physical education. This is an approach to using the meaningful physical education and universal design for learning frameworks with adapted physical education when writing IEP goals. Typically, IEP goals are based off of what the adapted physical educator views as a deficit or a need with the student that they are working with. Sometimes the adapted physical educator may ask for suggestions or input from the parents. Additionally, the adapted physical educator may create goals based on the student's needs and align that with the physical education standards and grade level outcomes. Overall, there is little student involvement in the creation of IEP goals, and student interests are not usually taken into consideration. Therefore, it is proposed that adapted physical educators apply the meaningful physical education and universal design for learning frameworks to their process of writing IEP goals in order to create goals that are more meaningful for students and lead them towards finding joy in physical activity. Within this resource, there are suggested stages that adapted physical educators can use to follow to guide their practices. First, it is suggested that adapted physical educators get student and parent input on the desired content of the IEP goal. Then, once the content of the goal is determined, it is suggested that adapted physical educators assess their students' present level of performance with the skill that is the focus of the goal. Next, after the student has been assessed, the APE teacher can write the student's IEP goals with them. Following that, adapted physical educators may monitor progress and provide opportunities for reflection while working towards their goals. Finally, adapted physical educators and their students will need to decide what to do when the goal is achieved and what the next steps are moving forward. This page provides easy access links to each of the different parts of the stages of this approach. Individuals can use the links to learn more about the stages that they have special interest in. For the purpose of this video, I provide a brief overview of each page. First is the student input page. This stage focuses on adapted physical educators receiving student input on the content of their IEP goals in order to create goals that are more meaningful to students. This section describes how adapted physical educators can do this, such as through creating student input worksheets. Here you will find examples of questions that can be included on worksheets at each level, as well as some other examples. Next is the parent input page. This stage focuses on adapted physical educators receiving input from parents on the content of their child's IEP goals in order to create goals that are relevant to the child's life outside of school. This section is a description of how adapted physical educators can do this, such as through creating parent input worksheets. Here you'll find sample questions that can be used on these worksheets. Following the parent input stage is assessing students' present level of performance. This stage focuses on adapted physical educators informing their students of what they are doing throughout the entire assessment process, as well as creating authentic assessment experiences and allowing students to make choices during their assessments. This section is a description of how adaptive physical educators can do this. Here you will find examples of this stage being used with a sample student. Next is writing the IEP goal. This stage focuses on adapted physical educators giving their student an active role in creating their own goals in order to lead students towards taking ownership of their goals and being self-motivated to work towards and achieving them. This section is a description of how adapted physical educators can do this, such as through explaining to the student what a goal is, providing a goal writing worksheet, and determining what aspects of the goal a student should be in control of. Here you will find examples of dialogues of informing the student about goal writing and completing a goal writing worksheet. Below this, you will find examples of goal writing worksheets being completed at each school level. The fifth stage is working towards the student's IEP goals. This stage focuses on how adapted physical educators can prioritize democratic practices, reflective practices, the features of the meaningful physical education framework, and the tenets of the universal design for learning framework. Because this section lasts a majority of the student's IEP period, it is by far the largest stage of this approach. This section describes how adapted physical educators can prioritize the meaningful physical education and universal design for learning frameworks while students are working towards their goals. Here you will find an example of this with a sample student. Additionally, you will find a sample of a teacher reflection worksheet with an example of it completed. Finally, you will find examples of student reflection worksheets completed for each school level. After working towards the goal is goal achievement. This stage focuses on how adapted physical educators and their students can reflect on the process of achieving the IEP goals throughout the year, as well as before the student's annual IEP meeting to determine what changes need to be made. This section describes how adapted physical educators can do this, such as through adjusting students' goals to make it more achievable and adjusting how they are working towards the goal. Here you will find an example of reflecting on goal achievement with a sample student. The final stage of this approach is titled Moving Forward. This stage focuses on adapted physical educators and students reflecting on the use of this approach and discussing what worked well and what they want to change in the future. This section describes how adapted physical educators can do this, such as through reflecting individually with their students and with parents to determine how practices can be improved in the future. Finally, the last section of this website is dedicated to how parts of this approach were used in practice at University of Wisconsin-La Crosse's Motor Development Program. These first sections describe how adapted physical educators can use these examples, as well as provides contextual information on what the Motor Development Program is. Here you will find a blank and a completed version of the parent input worksheet, both having additional information underneath. Additionally, there are examples of blank and completed student input worksheets at each age level within this program. Each of these examples has additional information underneath as well. Finally, there are examples of student reflection worksheets, but there was not enough time within the program for these to be distributed to participants, so there are no examples of then completed. That concludes all of the information that was included within this website. Hope this video was helpful in summarizing all of the information I have done all of the information and all of the work that I have done for this graduate project. Thank you for listening.